Welcome to Crossing the Line. I'm your host, Joelle Casteix. What happens when two survivors in different states share the same abuser and decide to tell the truth out loud? Today, we're talking to Sarah Hedlund and Diana Mondragon, hosts of Blooming After Grooming, a podcast that tackles grooming, abuse, healing, and prevention with honesty, humor, and heart. If you listened to the last episode of Crossing the Line, you heard them interview me. Now we're turning the tables. Their story is remarkable, and they're pretty awesome. Thank you both so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
That's your turn.
Thank you for having. Yeah, sorry. We're trying not to talk over each other. Thank you for having us on. What a nice intro. I know that Diana and I both really struggle with compliments, so I'm proud of us for sitting through that.
Well, yes,
you did an excellent job. So let's start at the beginning. How did the two of you first discover that you shared the same abuser, and what was going through your minds when you realized that this just wasn't your story? It was a shared and expansive story.
Diana, do you want me to go ahead of how I tracked you down? Yes.
Yes, please do.
So I kind of had, we call it our aha moments, but I had my aha moment back in 2022, I think was the year, where I just I knew I had been abused, but I really had come to terms finally with the idea that it wasn't my fault and that there was probably somebody else, right? And I just started Googling and I found posts from Diana on I don't even know, Facebook from 10 plus years ago, that I got a vibe that it seemed like there was something going on between them. I Googled Diana. I found out where she went to high school. I found out that that's the high school where this teacher, our abuser, worked at the time, and did the math, realizing she had to have been his student before their relationship started. And then I cyber stalked her some more and found her phone number on LinkedIn. And I just cold texted Diana out of nowhere, which is the intro to our podcast of each episode, is the text messages that, started our whole relationship, which was me just saying, hey, I don't know if this is what happened to you, but this is what happened to me. And if you're willing to talk, let me know. So that's how we met.
So what did it feel like to get that text, Diana?
I was, I think, already prepared for that text. I had my aha moment about a year before, and that aha moment really kind of led to just a mental breakdown in general. There was a lot of other things kind of going on in my life, and I was in a partial hospitalization program, and I couldn't go to the program that day because I had COVID symptoms. This was in 2022, and I got this text from Sarah, and it kind of, I was ready for it because even though I had my aha moment in 2021, because there were so many other things happening, I had put processing being groomed and sexually abused kind of on the back burner. I wasn't really ready to dive into that. And then once I actually got myself in this program and started really looking at myself and my habits and the things that I was doing, I felt just prepared in so many ways. When I got this text from Sarah, it was comforting to me. It wasn't rattling. I wasn't it was just, it felt like this, it was time. And since then, we had a conversation, I think within 2 days, and it was just, it felt so natural. She felt like someone who was already a friend. It could have been so weird, and it wasn't. And so, yeah, since then, there's just definitely still times where I'm I can't believe this is how it all turned out. But it's complicated, but I'm very grateful.
So what's your age difference between the two of you?
I'm 40.
36. I just turned 36. I think about 4, right? 4-ish years.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's pretty rapid succession onto the next school and the next.
So he left my school district the year after I graduated high school. So he went to Illinois, I think, in 05. And then
I met him in 06.
Yeah. So there was a year and a half, I think we did the math, was maybe between when I stopped talking to him and when he probably started grooming you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he did not waste a lot of time.
Well, they don't. And there's probably people in between and
Yes.
before and after. Now, has he ever been arrested or outed or?
No.
Sadly, no.
Frustrating. He was interviewed by the police, and let me tell you, the money I would pay for the footage to see that and watch him sweat. But no. Statute of limitations in Iowa for criminal had there used to be a statute of limitations. They have now removed it in Iowa, but it's not retroactive.
Yeah.
So if you'd already aged out, your SOL. And then in Illinois, they did do an investigation, but the burden of proof, is high, and abuse is hard to prove so many years later.
Yeah. So we had visions when we first met of like how this was going to go. And it did include him getting arrested and like taken in handcuffs, with
the perp walk,
just, like, escorting him out of the school. That did not happen. But I will say, in one of the quote unquote investigations, it was an internal investigation done by the district where there was a concern. He was escorted by security off school property while he went on leave for them to do their quote unquote investigation, which, obviously didn't lead to anything. But there were concerns about his behavior before me and after me. But no, he never did. He was never arrested.
Is he still teaching?
No.
Not that we're aware of. So he lost his teaching license.
We're aware of. Thank you, Sarah.
Not we're aware of, because private schools is a whole other thing. So he is permanently banned from teaching in the state of Illinois and Iowa, on public school level. He could teach in private schools. It is our understanding that he does not live in either one of those states anymore. Yes, I don't think he's teaching. I hope he's not teaching. But that's also partially the reason that, I have a website that lists his name and his photos that he put on Facebook and all of the legal documentation surrounding our cases to make a paper trail so that, God forbid, if he does have access to youth now, people can figure out his deal.
There's so much power in that because so when I came forward in 2003, and when my case settled, I got all the documents in my case and I put all those suckers online because he would go around and say, oh, it didn't happen. I didn't do it. She made it up, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh no, just go on this webpage and boop, there are all the documents where you admit to it. So there's a lot of power in there. And
yeah, I was really happy that, I can't remember who it was. I think it was a lawyer somewhere along the way that had pointed that out to me. She was like, as long as what you're sharing is public information and if it's coming from another source, you're fine. She's like, you could get a billboard and you could put it all up there. And I was like, really? Like, if that person hadn't said that, I don't think I would have had the idea to do the website, which has now had like thousands and thousands and thousands of views over the last few years. So it feels really good to know that we have educated some people about this person's behavior.
Mm-hmm. Keeping other people safe, hopefully.
How comfortable are you talking about what happened, about the grooming process and how that turned into abuse and how you were able to get through that?
Yeah, I think at this point, I feel comfortable talking about the experience. I think part of me is still working through how the abuse impacted me long term. I was with him during some really formative years, and for a long time I was being influenced by him from the age of 16 to 25, and there's things that I'm still working through. So I think I sometimes hesitate to be one to give a lot of advice about it, but I'll talk about what happened to me. That was very important to me to be able to do as part of what with the legal action that I took, is to still be able to talk about what happened to me, because it does help other people. We have gotten messages from listeners of our podcast that it has helped them to hear similar stories, similar experiences, and that's why we do it. But yeah, I don't know, Sarah, what about you? How comfortable do you feel now these days?
Fine. I just got up in front of, 400 people where I work to ask the possible future governor of Iowa his stance on removing statute of limitations. Which I told Diana, man, that feels a lot different than recording a podcast in your art studio with your friend. It's a little bit more intimidating, but yeah, no, I mean, I'm comfortable, talking about it. I think we've always kind of taken the stance on our podcast of like, we don't go into details too much because we want to hold the line between like educating and sharing, but also not just making like trauma porn. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I think there's a line there. But yeah, to Diana's point too, I also think, I don't think any of us fully understand how much some of this stuff impacts us. I think that's the rest of your life journey, right? Because you can just be tiptoeing through the tulips and then all of a sudden you trip on an old trauma rock and it just knocks you down for a couple of days. So, I think that that's a continuous discovery for sure.
So, Diana, you said something that I think is really important for people to hear. You said between 16 and 25. Was that the entire length of the... That's really important because I think so many survivors, women in particular, don't come forward because they're like, oh, well, I was over 18. And it's like, no, I mean, can you expound on that? Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, I think, and that was part of why, for a long time, it was really hard for me to fully understand what was wrong with the relationship. Like I kind of always told myself the story of like, oh, I was just so mature for my age. And like, that's why none of the boys my age liked me is because I was just so mature. But here's this like older man who, took interest in me and we fell in love and da, da, da. I think that yes, like once I told my parents about him when I was 22. It's like we kept our quote unquote relationship a secret until like after I graduated college. And then I remember when I had my aha moment and first started like really seeing the abusive relationship for what it was, that I wasn't an active participant. I was 16 when I met this person, and all the other things that I understood now as an adult. And I was talking about it with some people in my life. I did hear things like, well, at some point you were an adult, at some point you were making your own decisions, and well, at some point you did love him really, and like those kinds of things. So those, and in those moments, I did the best that I could to try to educate the person of like why that's not necessarily reality. Like why that's not, I mean, yes, I was making decisions, but I had also been groomed and manipulated and influenced since the age of 16, to see it as my responsibility to protect this man's job and lie about how we met and lie about how, we got into this relationship. I hope that answered the question.
No, it does, because I come from the Catholic school tradition, and there are a lot of altar boys who ended up having the priest who abused them officiate their wedding. And people are like, oh, that must mean that you were like, you were a willing participant or whatever. And the reaction that I get from the survivors, normally, I was so manipulated and in his web that there was no one else I could have officiate my wedding. He had that kind of power and control over me. And it's a kid's job to be in love. That's their job. And when an adult manipulates that, I mean, of course, most survivors love their abuser because the abuser tricked them into it, or they were someone the kid already knew and loved. So Sarah, what was she posting that made you perk up?
Well, ironically, I had actually found Diana when she was still in high school. Were you still in high school?
I was still in high school in the MySpace days. Yes.
Oh God, I would pay money to go back and find this. So I had a suspicion years earlier, or more of just a nagging, like, what if there's another one, but more in like I don't know. It wasn't the same aha as I had years later, right? Like I was still feeling guilty, or still feeling that I had participated in this thing. Like at that point I was very much like, we did this messed up thing together, but I don't want him to do it with somebody else. and I'm worried there's somebody else. And so I had searched his name on MySpace, and a bunch of Diana's posts came up at the time when she was in high school. And it was like, this is what I would have been putting on there if MySpace had existed when I was in high school. But we were just far enough in age that social media, you know, had come up around. And it was just like, she was posting like Batman stuff, which he's a big Batman fan. And like, I know him, right? Like, I know the things he likes. I know the bands he likes. I know the movies he likes. And everything she's posting was like stuff he likes. And then I think she had some post about, you know, this man saved my life or something, or like a birthday cake. He had like a birthday cake
so
or something about him. I know.
But it's,
and I even created,
I did. Yeah.
And I created a fake account and I tried to catfish Diana. Because I was like, well, if she tells him my name, he's going to tell her I'm unhinged. And like, she won't talk to me. So I made a fake account and I tried to be like, oh, I had him at his last school. He was like my favorite teacher. And she like did not respond to me. Like I was probably so suspicious and like so red flaggy. So I do remember that. And that's partially, I feel like years later when I actually did locate her, when I saw her picture, I was like, I think this is the same girl. And I think that was partially what like helped me connect the dots, is like, I think this is the same person. But at that point that I found Diana in 2022, at that point they had a public relationship, you know, so it was like very clear they had been dating. But at the point that I reached out to her, I didn't know if they were still dating. Like for all I know, she could have been married to the guy. Like I got nothing. So when I contacted her, I was like, this could be messy. Like I was like,
quite a leap of faith.
Yeah.
Yes. Or she's not ready to acknowledge what happened to her, and I'm just about to blow somebody's life up who like is still drinking the Kool-Aid that they just had a consensual relationship with their teacher.
So that leads me into my next question, because we both have talked about aha moments, but it's not really aha. It's like because then a few years later you have another and then and even, you know, and you'll keep going on and have the moment. So like, what for each of you? What was the moment where you're like, this is messed up. There's something really wrong here.
Well, to my point, I feel like I knew something was really wrong very quickly after it happened. Like, but I blamed myself for my participation in it up until 2022. I feel like that was the big shift for me in 2022, is I suddenly realized I was not a consenting participant in this situation. Because up until that point, I was like, that guy's a creep and that's weird, but I was into it. You know what I mean? And like, I was still holding it. And that for me, that was the big shift. I was like, oh no, like you were a victim of a crime, you know, which is different. And you were groomed and you did not consent to this. And you had no control at all in a situation that you thought you had control in. So I feel like that was my big shift. But yeah, for a long time before that, I knew that it was like icky and gross.
What triggered that shift?
Actually, I was in like a witchy online group, and we had a homework assignment where we were supposed to make a body salt scrub. And the idea of it was to wash away your past like lovers from your body as like a cleansing practice. It's like the most woo-woo experience of my life. And I was doing it and I wasn't even thinking about him. I was just like, la, 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 salt scrub. This is going to be a nice shower. And then as it literally washed off my body, it was the most strange, like it like sloughed off my skin. And it was like a lightning bolt, just was like, you were groomed. Like you had no part in this. Like it was like the most witchy moment of my life of just like, wow, it just was an immediate shift. And I got a hold of Diana the very next day. So,
and that's not totally unique. But I don't know how much you guys, you know, listen to classical musical theater, but even in South Pacific, she washed that man right out of her hair. I mean, it's
I was in the production of South Pacific.
Ooh.
I was the little French daughter. I was like in 4th grade at the time. Yeah. Yes, Diana, how about you?
Well, yeah, for me, similar to Sarah, like I knew that it was kind of an unconventional, kind of messy involvement, you know, relationship. But I was also, like I said, like still telling myself the story of this is just an older man that I got involved with, and he just happened to be my high school English teacher. And I was sharing that I was really nervous about sharing that detail of my life that I had. My ex was my ex high school English teacher, with like my colleagues when I started working at a school as a school counselor. And I had gotten pretty close with two of my colleagues. We were on the party planning committee together, and so we were planning an office party one day, and just kind of killing time until the end of the bell, or till the last bell. And we were talking about like secrets that we have, like innocent kind of secrets. And I mentioned that I had dated my high school English teacher, and this was the first time that I saw reactions that were not like, oh, tell me, oh my God, tell me everything, like, oh, that's what? It was more just a blank look of almost like concern, and like, we're uncomfortable. I don't know what to say right now. And then one of my colleagues, he came to my office later, or like at the later that week, and just kind of gently said, that situation wasn't okay. And I was like and I was like 26 at the time. So like a year or two after leaving our abuser. And that was really the first time that I think like I heard that from an adult man. Like my dad and like other people in my life had thoughts about the situation, but had never, that was the first time that I heard it delivered in that way. And then, yeah, similar to Sarah, like I had like my aha moment. It also felt just like like a slap in the face kind of thing, where I was driving home from work, and I was thinking about Evan Rachel Wood, and how she came out and named Marilyn Manson as the person who groomed and sexually abused her, and like just feedback and criticism she was getting from people of how like, oh, well, she was 18, and what she should have known better. It was Marilyn Manson. What did she expect of what all this stuff? And I just felt so defensive, and felt like, why am I getting so defensive for this person? And then something in me was like, because you went through this, like you also were targeted by an older man who you tried to be what they wanted you to be, and you did things that he liked, and you did things that he told you to do, and you lived your life in a certain way because it's what he wanted. And so, yeah, that happened. And then a year later, Sarah came into my life.
What was the age difference? Just so that the listeners get a picture.
16 years.
Yeah,
He's 12 years older than me. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot of years for both of you. I mean, it's never right. But that's a guy who has had 16 years of practice in doing this. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And we still strongly believe, yes, that there were probably people possibly before me. I feel like everybody we talked to, including the police, were like, there is no way you were the first one. Like he just like knew what he was doing too clearly, too smoothly. So we still kind of strongly, believe that there might have been other people. But as of now, we have not found any other people that had experienced what we experienced. I will say, to the extent that we experienced, we did actually have other former students come forward with allegations of just kind of inappropriate, communication or behavior, but nothing like physical, like what Diana and I experienced.
So what ended it for you, Sarah? What made you stand up and say, I'm out of here? Or like, what was that moment?
I went to college, and he actually tried to talk me out of going to college and waiting a year so that he could come with me, and thank my former me that I was like, that sounds lame. I really wanted to get out of my small hometown. And I was really excited to go to college. So I went anyways, and we stayed together all the way through, I think it was like February of my freshman year. And honestly, it was getting away from my hometown and getting away from the bubble that he had built. Like, we'd spent all of our time alone in his apartment. He, from my perception, had no friends. Like, I never was around anybody. I was around his family, who said nothing. And
I know. I was like, what?
Yeah, no, he took me to his parents' house. He took me on a trip to visit both of his siblings on a road trip down to Florida. He took me to Disney World, which is creepy on a whole other level. And And I got snowed in at his apartment when I was home for Christmas break from college. And I realized he's the most annoying human being in the world after being stuck in his apartment for like 4 days. I was like, you are horrible. And yeah, and going to college, it was that realization of, I'd put our pictures up in my dorm room and my dorm mate would be like, who's that? Like, is that your uncle? And I'd be like, this is my boyfriend. And they'd be like, how would you meet him? And I would like, he was my teacher. And they'd be like, excuse me, what? Like, and you start to realize this isn't normal. This is weird. This is creepy. And then he would like come up to visit me in college and it was weird, and it's like, he stayed in my dorm room, which is so disturbing to think about. Like, I shared a dorm room with another girl. Like, if I could find her, I would apologize. Like, like it's really, it was very eye-opening, which is why I don't think he wanted me to go to college and live on campus, is because I think he knew this is what would happen. And then I started doing the math and I realized that he was old, and that was gross because I was 18 and I was like, I don't want to take care of you when you're old. And I broke up with him over the phone. And then I went and picked up my stuff from his apartment like a month later. And that was like the last time I think I ever saw him. So yeah, college, I would say, is what got me out of it.
So he takes you to Disney World. He takes you to meet his siblings. You meet his parents. There were no red flags that other school administrators saw at all?
We did run into the superintendent of my school at a super Walmart, I would say a month or two after I graduated, and we were holding hands. And I know for a fact that he saw it and there was no follow-up. And, or at least I shouldn't say I know for a fact, is my understanding. There was no follow-up. I never heard about it. And then our abuser's family, as far as I'm aware, did not have any, if they had concerns, they kept them to themselves. Because they also met Diana and did not mention me to her, which I also think is pretty fucked up and pretty telling, right? That they were choosing to protect him, even internally within the family, it seemed.
Yeah, because Diana, you were kind of like a member of the family after being in that web for so long.
Yeah, it was strange. It was, I mean, I was so surprised to know that, I mean, Sarah found me because she found my name in his dad's obituary. And I didn't even know that until she told me that's how she found me.
I forgot that detail. Yeah. You were listed in his dad's obituary
as like his partner?
Girlfriend. Yeah.
As his longtime girlfriend. And we were already like broken up at that point. So it was very strange to me. His family, we were never like, they were never super accepting of me. There was also like some racism there on his parents' side. And, and his brother too had like made a comment once, like you could tell they had feelings about the situation, but like no one ever, talked to me about it. And yeah, I never heard anything from his family about like, hey, you're not the first former student that he has introduced to us, so yeah, it was a strange dynamic I had with them. They lived in Iowa, and so we would see them for like certain holidays or like the summer, birthdays, that kind of stuff.
So what about at the school? I mean, while you were a student, so it started when you were 16, so that's like junior year. Did anyone raise any red flags at the school?
When I went to school there, I knew that there were students and teachers who thought that like I hung out in his classroom too much or I spent too much time around him. But again, like no one ever really talked to me about it. And then when I did graduate and we became public as far as like our relationship, he did tell, like there were students who knew. We actually talked to one of his former students who said that like she remembers him just being so brazen about it, about the fact that he was dating a former student. She remembers thinking like, why is this just an okay thing to be openly talking about with your current students? And like, why don't the adults have any opinions about this? And so, yeah, I don't know. It's really interesting to see like the progression of how comfortable he became with just being this predator, from like
kept
the
getting
things
away
that
with it.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, it seemed it was a strategy that worked well for him. Why change it?
Yeah.
I don't know how much you guys know about Rosemead High School here in Southern California. There was a big expose in Business Insider, and I thought my high school was like really bad. Rosemead High School was awful, and one of the teachers that they profiled had like married students, plural, and the teachers had a baby shower for the former student when she was like 19. And this is late 90s. And I couldn't believe that. I mean, even in any way, shape, or form, if a therapist did that, or it would be like a no-go. I mean, even on some job sites, you can't date, someone who reports to you. And I mean, this is a lot worse than that. So it's mind blowing. I mean, did any teachers or administrators besides the superintendent who decided to never go to Super Walmart again? I mean, so,
It was an awkward moment. I can tell you, it was a lot of like, oh my God. My school had it was a problem at my school at the time when I was growing up. We had one teacher who was married to a former student. We had another who lived with a former student, like they never got married, but they lived together. We had, one that everyone knew was sleeping with a former student. We had another that had to leave town because it found out she was involved with a student. Like, I know of like 7 off the top of my head. And I went to a very small school, kindergarten through 12th grade in one building, like less than 1,000 students, the whole building. And it was happening that much. And I credit that a lot to the normalization of what happened to me, though. So like when it was happening, it didn't feel as scandalous as it should have because I was watching it happen in front of me my entire education. It was just this known things. It was like, oh yeah, he's married to his, so-and-so's older sister, and
everyone was groomed. Yeah. Everybody was groomed.
And when I came forward, one of my male classmates said that. He was like, I knew what was happening to you, but we were all groomed. Like we all thought it was normal. So like none of us thought to even report it because why would we? It's what everybody was doing.
So Diana, you said something about you took legal action. Did you have a civil suit as well as a criminal, or was it just a criminal investigation?
It was just a criminal investigation, and then I did do a civil suit against the school district, against our abuser, and then actually against a few adult bystanders who, as I mentioned, I knew that there were some concerns and they had never intervened. And one of them actually was my social worker. I'm sorry if you can hear my cat around here.
Cats are always welcome. Cats are always welcome. You put the cat on video.
It's a handful.
It's great.
Yeah. I've struggled with mental health pretty much since I can remember. And in high school, I met a lot with a social worker. And there was a meeting that I had where I honestly, like looking back at it, I think I really did want to tell somebody what was happening. And I was talking about how I was getting ready to go on birth control. And she kind of like gave me this look, and like her face just turned white, and she started like wringing her hands, and she looked so uncomfortable. And she said, I can't keep everything between you and me, right? And when she said that, like I knew that she knew that I was talking about the teacher, because that's the only, like, people saw me with him all the time. They saw us together all the time. I would go in early. I would stay late. Like I had an early dismissal and a late arrival just so I could spend more time in his classroom. And so when she said that, like I lied and said that I was talking about someone else. And then she actually saw us, me and the abuser, out at public one day, like having breakfast, and she looked so uncomfortable seeing us there. And so she was someone that I listed in the lawsuit, as well as the assistant principal at the time, who did his own internal investigation. Didn't involve anyone else, just his own internal investigation, where he asked me if anything had happened while I was a student, asked our abuser, and then asked another former student, as far as I know. And that never made it into our abuser's actual personnel file, like HR file. And I found that out through the police investigation. And so based off what I found out, in the police investigation, and then also the school investigation, because the school ended up doing like their own investigation, the district did. I found out just the extent of how much these specific adults like knew and chose to do nothing because they didn't want to ruin his reputation or, spread rumors, or it wasn't that big of a deal to them, to do anything about it.
I don't want to be the bad guy. Maybe this is different, and that whole, like, this is my own secret internal double secret probation internal investigation, like in a notebook. That's super common that principals do that.
It's so frustrating. Oh
yeah, and they take that notebook from school to school. Now that's like horribly illegal and that gets people put in jail. But it astounds me because, and then the social worker, I mean, not only is a social worker a mandatory reporter, but it's like, hello, you're also a social worker? She's a danger, or someone is a danger to her. You kind of have to report this.
And she knew also like my other mental health issues. Like she had a meeting with my parents one day about taking me to get an evaluation for my mental health. So I was very upset, when I found out, like, just, and I struggle, right? Like I want to give people sometimes the benefit of the doubt of just like, well, she didn't know better, that was a different time or whatever. But there's anger there, she and other people could have done something and didn't, and it affected the rest of my life.
Yeah. And, going back to the mental health issues, was that one of the ways he targeted you? Or do you think
that's one of the things that he tried to say about me when we started talking openly and I'm sure maybe you can relate to this, Joelle, of like, oh, well, she was just really mentally unstable in high school. So, there was just always something going on with her. Like he mentioned that to the school investigator who I forgot why they were talking, but he had mentioned to her that like I was just this like mentally unstable teenager and Sarah was just this like kid from a rural Iowa with like a single parent.
It was like broken family. Like I was like some white trash broken family hillbilly, and I'm like, excuse you. Like, first of all,
even if you were, it doesn't matter.
My very active in my life. Thank you very much. Rude.
Yeah.
Yes.
So he definitely, that was upsetting. And then when we were, in the entanglement, when we were involved, I remember when I did struggle, he made it seem like he couldn't or even didn't want to help me. He would say things like, well, I'm not qualified for this and you need to talk to someone. And like, he was just really goes to show how like brainwashed I was, because there really wasn't anything redeeming about this person. Like he really broke down my defenses, and not at all.
No, he's not cute. It's a bummer. And I mean, I do think that the mental health part of it is also really strategic, because you think about the fact that you would be easier to manipulate. You would also be someone that adults would be less likely to believe, because they're like, well, look, this kid's got all this stuff going on. Maybe she's just attaching herself to this person because she's all over the place. Like it's a very easy, there's a reason, that people target kids that are struggling with mental health issues, because they are less likely to be listened to by other adults, for sure.
Well, and his emotional maturity isn't exactly stellar either. If,
no.
If 16-year-old girls are his hunting ground. I mean, ugh.
And his apartment is full of action figures. So,
Yeah.
Little dollies.
Yeah. Sorry to all mentally stable, healthy dudes with action figures out there.
Yes.
You're not all trouble. You're not all problematic. But yeah he was quite a cacophony of red flags. Yes.
So tell me about the podcast. What was the germ of the idea that led to Blooming After Grooming?
Well, okay. How do I say this without sounding weird?
Too late. You're already weird.
Good. I love it. You're right. Embrace who I am. Yeah. I just love the idea of leaving crumbs for future civilizations to see what life was like. at this time of human experience, right? Like I grew up as someone, I was born in 1990, and what life has been like as part of, the end of the 20th, beginning of the 21st century. Like this is part of the conversation and I think, grooming and specifically like educator sexual misconduct and grooming that leads into sexual abuse is just like one part under this giant umbrella of talking about unhealthy relationships. And, I feel like now we're talking more about coercive control and manipulation and gaslighting and emotional abuse and like all these things that I think happen more often than people want to admit in relationships. Sometimes they're intentional, sometimes they're not, but we can't like address it if we don't know how to like see the signs with other people, even within ourselves. So I just got really excited about documenting our story because we just, every time, we've shared about how we met each other, like our experience, like that's one of the biggest, like, oh my God, what kind of moments is like, what do you mean? How do you even find each other? I think it's just such a cool thing that we did find each other that, through all of this. And I'm just often having to remind myself how lucky we are that we do have each other. So many other survivors are going through this alone and have to fight to be heard or felt seen or validated, and having to explain themselves about like why, yeah, they were 22, but they weren't actively participating in this dynamic of this relationship. So I really wanted somewhere where we could talk about how we met, what we learned, and hopefully be able to help other people. And, thankfully Sarah was like, yeah, okay, let's do it. And here we are.
Yeah. So what did you think when she came to you with this? Like, oh, I got to buy a microphone, or,
Yeah, I mean, yes. Oh my God. We tried. Yes, it was a mishap. We recorded like a few episodes with, our like AirPods, and it was a disaster. And
it was so bad.
It was so bad. It was just scratchy noises and mumbling. And giggling. We also couldn't stop laughing for like the first 5 times we recorded. We just had the giggles really bad. Because our coping mechanism, if listeners haven't figured out, is humor and making jokes and just kind of laughing through awkward things. So I always tell people like, yeah, our podcast is pretty much just like, and then this is the worst thing that ever happened to me. Yeah. And we just like awkwardly giggle through it because that's our trauma response. No, I mean, I liked the idea of it, and it did feel like every time we shared our story with somebody, they would just be like, oh my God, you have to tell more. Like I think people are so fascinated by the idea that yes, we found each other and that we worked together, and not only like had him held as accountable as we could legally in the criminal justice system, but also like became genuine friends. Like we've gone on a bunch of trips together, like, like we're friends, like we're not just bonded together because of this awful thing that we share. Like we genuinely love and care about each other. And I think that's a really unique experience. And, to Diana's point, we are super lucky that we have each other. I was in therapy right before this. And like I said that to my therapist, I was like, there are times when it just gets on top of you. And there's only one person in my life that I know I can talk to about this. And she will always understand what I mean. And like, I can't imagine doing this by myself. And so I think what's the coolest part of our podcast for us is that the people that have reached out, that we're giving them that sense of community, even though they're just listening to us. Like we've had people say like, it feels like I'm talking to you guys. Like it feels like I'm in the room with you and you know how I feel. And it feels really validating. And so I think that makes all of it worth it, just to know that we're kind of giving people that sensation of community.
Yeah, you really filled a gap because, NC Sesame's podcast really goes from the NC Sesame viewpoint. We interview experts and everything else. What you guys are able to do is make it real. And it was one of the first interviews I did where it was okay for me to laugh. Because, I mean, I wouldn't call humor my coping mechanism, but if you don't laugh at my jokes, I don't like you very much. And so, and it was just so nice to be able to laugh because it's not, I mean, I've been in this movement for so long. I mean, you couldn't even smile at first, don't smile. Yeah. People think you're having fun. I'm like, oh God, do you know how crappy I look when I don't smile? So it's amazing what you've been able to do. And people do feel like they're in the room because they are in the room with you. You have invited them in. And that is really super powerful and sorely needed. for survivors of any kind of sexual abuse, not just, educator sexual misconduct.
Well, thank you. Those are very kind words to hear. Yes, I think we've gotten mostly good feedback about it. There's been a few people that have, thought we were a little too casual, but I think, you know what? There's lots of other content for you to consume. If we're not your cup of tea, go pour yourself another cup. So
yeah, send them over to me, and I will give them a nice little stiffer interview. And but yeah. So what has shocked you most in making this podcast? Was there a certain story? Was it your bond? Was it the outreach? What is the thing that has really just amazed you about building this podcast in this community?
What's amazed me? I think we wanted to set out the podcast to be, it's like you said, and thank you for saying that, Joelle, to invite people into the room with us and feel seen, feel validated. I think I wasn't expecting to hear how many people really felt like they needed this podcast. I was definitely hoping that people would receive it well and enjoy it. I was like lighting candles that people weren't going to cancel us, but I wasn't expecting to receive as much love as we have from our listeners. There's a lot of common things that we share as survivors, but each survivor really does have their own unique story. And it's been just a real honor to witness even just a little part of some of those stories, and to know that our hot takes and our banter, our chit chat, the way that we have thought about things and the things that we have learned, and some of the stuff that we've learned in therapy, that is helping other people work through their own trauma.
How about you, Sarah?
Yeah, I would agree. I think some of those emails that we get where people say, listening to your podcast helped me finally tell my family what happened to me, or help me finally be ready to call the police and report. Those have brought me to tears every time we receive those, because you just realize the ripple effect, right, of what you're doing. Because it does feel like you're just screaming into the void, and you're kind of whatever, we've got 20 followers on Spotify. Okay, cool. Woo. But then when you hear those stories, it's okay, that is worth it if it's just impacting one or two people. And then the other part of it, I would say, is that I have had people in my life who have told me this sparked a conversation with my kids about consent, and about what if they see something happening to a friend of theirs, and being a bystander. And so just knowing that we're also, even just within our own inner circle of friends and family, we are sparking some of these really important conversations that if we had those, maybe we wouldn't have experienced what we experienced. Feels pretty amazing, because I think we're making impacts we'll never know about, because maybe we're stopping something from happening to even just one person. Would be pretty amazing, but we'll never know, because it won't happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. And can I share? I'm sorry. Can I?
No, you can't share. What do you think this is? No, go on.
Your podcast?
Yeah.
One email that I do think about often, and I really appreciate this person wrote in and was I also had this thought. I had shared during one episode that around the holidays, Etsy came out with this commercial where a teacher got some personalized drumsticks for one of her students, and how I saw that and thought, no, that's not appropriate. And then felt really weird, because I was anyone else watching this would be oh my God, that's so sweet. This teacher cares so much. And a listener wrote in and they were I also had that thought, and I just felt so seen, and I felt less crazy and damaged. And I really do think about when I have those kinds of thoughts, I think a lot about that email of there's no way I'm the only person. If someone else had this thought about this Etsy commercial, I'm not the only person having this reaction. So I do want to just give a shout out to the person who wrote in about that.
Well, because what you guys have is truly special. Because I know that the guy who abused me has other survivors, and if you probably put us in a room together, it'd be the most uncomfortable 7 minutes ever before everyone walked out. And a lot of it is because, you kind of knew about each other, but you didn't know about each other. And there's a lot of self-blame and a lot of self-hatred and a lot of blame for other people. And you guys were able to like not have that at all and move beyond and then create this, friendship and camaraderie and this podcast that can really show people there are very different stages of healing. Because like, yeah, I think that, oh yeah, I'm so healed, I'm so great. But yeah, you put me in a room with my abusers, other survivors. But yeah, we'll see how unhealed I am at that particular moment. Want to watch everything go south. There you have it. And so you've really done something quite amazing, and I want to honor that. I've been complimenting you, and I know you guys don't like to take compliments, but sit down and shut up and take it. I want to honor what you've been able to do, because this wasn't possible 20 years ago. Like 15 years ago or so, a friend of mine's like, oh, you should have a podcast. I'm like, who'd want to listen to a podcast about child sexual abuse? Now, if I had started it, I would, be this groundbreaking person, but I should have listened. But you guys have really, done some amazing things to move the movement forward. If you two could talk to your younger selves, younger Diana, younger Sarah, what would you say? Besides, don't ever wear those pants again.
I wish I still had my Jinko jeans.
Just thinking, I wish I still had some of the pants I did in high school.
I had some great jeans in high school. Oh God. This is Sarah. I think I would tell myself that you don't have to like every boy that likes you. I feel like the culture was so like about, or at least my existence in it was just so male centered, and having a romantic relationship was the end all be all, that I really just let men and boys that liked me kind of wash over me, and didn't necessarily really take the time to figure out if I liked those people, which sounds really weird, right? But like, I feel like that's a lot of what led me into my grooming and abuse situation as teacher, and then some other unfortunate relationships that I had afterwards, where I wasn't stopping to think, do I actually like this person? It was just a boy's paying attention to me. And that's kind of what I should be excited about. So yeah, stop caring so much about boys. That would be my suggestion. Go hang out with your girlfriends and enjoy your Jinko jeans. So yeah.
Yes, I love that. First of all, yes, build strong female friendships from early ages. I don't know where I'd be without my girlfriends. I guess along a similar sentiment, I would just tell younger Diana to not care so much about body image. Like I never felt attractive to boys my own age, and I think that was also part of what made any kind of attention from this older man just so intoxicating, was because I just wasn't getting it from anyone else. And I would just always felt like I was not like feminine enough, or, pretty enough, or, those kinds of things. So I would tell younger Diana to shut that shit down. Sorry. To not engage in those
you
thoughts.
Can swear.
She did it. It wasn't me that time.
Yeah.
Yes, so just like, you're the prize, and someone will come along, or if they don't, whatever, you're fine on your own, or you have girlfriends and cats. So life is good.
That's all you need.
It's hard. So in one of the earlier episodes I did of this podcast, I interviewed Glenn Lipson, and he's a psychologist, and he's down in San Diego. And when I asked him, what can we do? And he's like, we got to get rid of the princess dyad. And I'm like, the who? And he's like, no, the princess dyad, that every little girl thinks that she's a princess and some prince is going to come in and save her.
Yeah,
That's a big one. And I think that has really set a lot of girls up, because, oh man, I remember, I wanted to be Cinderella. I wanted to be Snow White. I wanted to be saved. I wanted this big, romance. And we condition our girls that, that's the be all and end all. Whereas we condition our boys to like go and sow their wild oats. Not that we want to do either of those things, but it's interesting, because you're living the research that he's doing, and about how things like the princess dyad, dyad, I actually had to look it up, is causing it's making girls more vulnerable to abuse. So,
well, yeah, it's like growing up on Disney movies, you know what I mean? And because so many of those relationships also are misunderstood and everybody's against them and they have to run off together, you know, like their family doesn't understand or they're from different world, Little Mermaid, right?
Yeah.
Like all these things. And there is a lot of messaging that it's romantic to be in a situation that nobody else approves of and that nobody understands and that it's just you two against the world. Well, that's grooming, baby. Like that's being in one of these, you know, situationships as we sometimes call them, but like that is really toxic messaging. And yeah, like if you grow up watching princess movies, yeah, that's the epitome of life, right? That's the peak of the mountain is romance and finding that guy. So I think it's a very common thread, and I think this younger generation is doing much better. I think they are not obsessed with it the way that we probably were.
So go with me on, you said situationship. That a word we use. What words do you replace with situationship?
Or we also say like manipulationship.
Yeah,
okay.
Yes,
or we've also said like ensnarement.
Yeah.
Ensnarement.
And we don't like saying
entanglement.
relationship because that sounds like it's just somebody you dated, and that's not what this is. So we try to be a little bit careful about how we say that.
Well, language is so important because
Absolutely.
I mean, it's when, you know, back when I was getting started, like, oh, well, you were in a relationship with your teacher. I'm like, but it wasn't consensual. Well, it was still a relationship. And then there wasn't a word that you could, then well, it's an abusive relationship, a manipulative relationship. But I really like situationship. It's a situation, it's happening, and it's not exactly good. And the language around love and loving your perpetrator because they manipulated you into it. And even the language around using the word, you know, grooming. We talked about this on the podcast I did with you. Grooming is kind of falling out of favor, but until we find something better, we're going to stay with it. And I think that it's going to be groundbreakers like you who change the language because, you know, for me, it was people weren't listening. But now you guys are at an age where it's like people are going to listen because it's not just Joelle, you know, blah, blah, blah. Like she always has.
Will they? We're also like 30 some, as Sarah would say, middle-aged people.
I'm a woman of a certain age now.
Hardly.
Yeah, and I mean, yes, well, it's starting to feel that way. Well, and I do think it is language. We have a couple episodes where we just talk about language specifically. We just deep dive into certain words. But even on a legislative level, you know, I talked on a subcommittee, I don't know, a year or two ago when they were updating some policy surrounding this subject. And they were talking about teacher-student relationships, like within the legal setting. And they described it as romantic relationship. And I was like, you can't write that into a bill. Like you are literally using groomers language in your law. It's not romantic. It is abuse. And they all were like, oh, snap. Like it wasn't their intention and they changed it and they took the word out. But it's like that says a lot. And there's a lot of messaging that goes into that when it comes to investigators and police and parents and perpetrators. If you're calling it romantic, that really colors it versus abusive, sexual abuse, which is what we're talking about. So yeah, I think language is wildly important. And yes, we've gotten feedback about grooming, but we've decided to be stubborn and we will leave it in our podcast name until we see
until there's a better word.
Well, yes. I did like mastication after manipulation.
Mastication or something like that.
But so we're going to wrap this up, but you guys asked me a really good question and you asked this to everyone pretty much at the end of your episodes. And I think it's important because it is, I think, such a key to your success. What do you each do to honor yourselves? Because, you know, you have this podcast and you're going through the healing process. What do you do to relax and be and honor who you are as a woman and a thriver and a survivor and all those things?
Let's see. What do I do? Oh, you know what I've been doing lately is escaping into other people's drama. And I, after like 10 plus years, have come back to reality TV. And Joelle, I need to know, do you personally know any of the OC housewives? I'm on like season 10.
I don't personally know
the
them.
tea.
But I
What
have
have you heard
had the
about
unfortunate luck to be in like a restaurant or a bar or something when they all come in. Like they came in on St.
Okay.
Patrick. This is totally off the subject, and I may or may not keep it in the show. But so my favorite Irish bar where my husband and I kind of met and everything else is called the Harp. And so it's St. Patrick's Day, which is like, it's once a year we go and we drink. I'm old. I don't do that anymore. So we go and they had like blocked off 3/4 of the patio, which in California in March is a big no-no. And it's because the Real Housewives came in.
So the house, gosh,
Yeah,
always get in
and
their way, those housewives.
And they have their super high heels on and their makeup's perfect. And I'm there in like a dirty t-shirt and my ripped jeans. I'm like, it's St. Patrick's Day.
Just want a beer.
Yeah. And and so that's the only run-ins I've had with them. And, they certainly wouldn't come into my neighborhood because, my neighborhood is where their help lives. So, yeah.
Thank you for that insight into the OC, the OC. But yeah, so I've, in addition to that, I spend time, like I said, like with my girlfriends. We have a lot of fun. We eat a lot of delicious food, and also my kitty cat. Yeah, that's what brings me joy these days.
How about you, Sarah?
I like to garden, so I spend a lot of time outside weeding and talking to my flowers and waiting for them to open. It's been kind of a chilly start to summer here, so things have not bloomed yet, and it's starting to annoy me because I live in Iowa and there's a very short window of time that I get to look at my flowers. So I do that. I try to go for walks. It's good for my mental health to just like get moving and, get things out of my body. I make a lot of art, and that always sparks a lot of joy for me. And also, women, I would just say spending time with like girlfriends and just having fun, goofing around is always like a real fills the cup is always a nice thing to do.
So before I sign off, what have I missed? What do you want to make sure that the NC Sesame audience knows or understands about you and the work that you do in the podcast and survivors in general?
Maybe I would just say there's no right or wrong way to heal. There's no right, wrong way to be a victim or an advocate. We say this a lot on our show of like, there's so many ways you can participate in trying to help. You don't have to be standing up in front of legislators or doing a podcast or, all these things. Like you could just be a good friend and a good parent and a good neighbor that's keeping an eye out for other people. But also like, you don't have to make jokes and you don't have to not make jokes. And I think we're just trying to represent that like, there are a lot of ways that trauma and abuse can impact you in a lot of ways that you can process it. And that it's okay if you're doing it the way that you're doing, as long as you're not hurting yourself or anybody else.
Yep, that all sounds great.
What she said.
Yeah.
What she said.
I approve.
That's
stamp.
So I have nothing even more to add. That's perfect. Yeah.
And so if people want to find you, what's the best place to go?
We have a website designed by Sarah. It's bloomingafterpod.com. They can also find us on Instagram and TikTok. Our handle is Blooming After Pod. Or you can send us an email at bloomingaftergrooming@gmail.com.
And they can find you anywhere they stream their content, correct?
Yes. Thank you, Joelle. That is also helpful information.
And giving them a 5-star review will help more people see it.
Please
rate,
follow
review,
us.
and subscribe.
You can find us on Spotify, Amazon, Apple, YouTube.
Yahoo. AOL.
Can't find us.
Yeah.
Right?
MySpace.
Right.
Yeah. SBC Global.
Yeah, all those.
Yes. Anywhere you get your podcast, you can find us. Blooming After Grooming.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. I truly, truly appreciate it. And a huge thank you to Sarah and Diana for sharing their stories and their wisdom. If today's conversation resonated with you, be sure to check out Blooming After Grooming wherever you listen to podcasts. And be sure to subscribe to Crossing the Line and give us a 5-star rating wherever you stream your content. Visit ncsesame.org to learn more about prevention, accountability, and survivor support. And until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and we'll see you at our next episode.